The Battle of Endor may have set this stage for the New Republic to form in Star Wars legends, but there were still plenty of wars to wage. And today we're going to talk about all the Supreme Commanders of the New Republic and its successor state, the Galactic Alliance, who ran those wars. By the time the New Republic formed, Admiral Ackbar had been established as the Supreme Commander of the Rebel Alliance fleet, a position he maintained from the New Republic's creation until 23 ABY, or years after the Battle of Yavin. He oversaw the campaigns against the Imperial warlords, including Thrawn, Dala, and the Reborn Emperor. In several of these campaigns, Ackbar faced opposition not just from Imperials, but also from political rivals within the New Republic. During the Thrawn campaign, for example, Bothan Councillor Borsk Felia attempted to sideline him, wanting increased power for Bothans, and Thrawn nearly succeeded at framing the highly capable admiral for treason, limiting his ability to challenge Thrawn on the battlefield, though Ackbar ultimately prevailed at the Battle of Bilbringi. Throughout his career, he primarily used the MC-80 Home 1 as his flagship, with the official Star Wars fact file saying it served in that capacity until his retirement. We do know, however, that he sometimes transferred his flag to other vessels, at least for a while, although it seems like he always made his way back to Home 1. During Operation Shadow Hand against the Reborn Emperor in 10 ABY, Ackbar commanded the fleet from the newer, more powerful MC-90 Defiance. Following this campaign, he moved to a different MC-90 variant, the Galactic Voyager, which he used at least during the Imperial attacks on Yavin in 12 ABY by Admiral Dala. It's unclear whether he alternated back and forth with Home 1, or if he maintained these ships for a few years before eventually just going back to Home 1. Especially given how few stories include Ackbar, Home 1, or any of these command ships between 12 and 23 ABY, or even just how few stories exist in that time period at all. We do know in one other campaign, called the Imperial Skirmishes of 17 ABY, Ackbar had a fourth major flagship, the captured Executor-class Guardian. He used this ship at the decisive Battle of Anx Minor, where it faced off against two Imperial Superstar Destroyers under the command of Grand Admiral Gilad Pellaeon, resulting in a victory which contributed heavily to Pellaeon's desire to seek peace 2 years later. Ackbar retired in 23 ABY 4 years after peace was officially made with the Empire, although minor warlords would still occasionally cause problems. Part of his retirement seems to have been motivated by the ascension of Borsk Felia to the Chief of State position, and he was replaced by someone who was a bit more aligned with Borsk Felia, Savv. Savv was a Celestian who wasn't seen as having the same strategic brilliance as Ackbar, but he was thought to be a perfectly capable peacetime administrator. Unfortunately for him, in 25 ABY, he was faced with one of the biggest crises in galactic history, the invasion of the Yuuzhan Vong. Originally he, like the government, did little to oppose them as they swept the Outer Rim, though as the war progressed, despite the failure to make any real progress against the Yuuzhan Vong and the loss of Coruscant, he slowly gained the respect of those serving under him. He continually sought the advice of the ailing Admiral Ackbar, who took on an advisory role and developed the plan executed under Savv's leadership to properly train and expand the fleet, preparing them to seek a final victory against the Yuuzhan Vong. This plan involved seeking out a series of small engagements and limiting defenses to only key worlds. During this war, the New Republic also reorganized into the Galactic Alliance, cooperating with the Hapes Consortium and Imperial Remnant, who joined the fight against the Yuuzhan Vong and ultimately formed one unified polity. Unfortunately, we don't have any solid information on what his flagships were at any point in his career. Following the war, in 29 ABY, Savv was replaced by the Bothan Admiral Trace Crefay, who'd arguably been the most dedicated and effective commander against the Vong, securing himself as a hero in the eyes of the galaxy thanks to his victory at Coruscant, reclaiming it from the invaders. Despite his accolades, his tenure was very short-lived. The Bothan species had declared our cry against the Yuuzhan Vong, a form of total war where the Bothan species swore to entirely wipe out an enemy. This conflicted with the new, uneasy peace achieved between the Galactic Alliance and the Vong, forcing Crefay to step down within the year. Savv was reinstated as Supreme Commander. For the entirety of Crefay's known career, though, his flagship was the Bothan assault cruiser Walrus. We see this earlier on in the Yuuzhan Vong War, and he also has it about 10 years later when he's serving with the Bothan fleet. Savv's second stint as Supreme Commander lasted a further 7 years, from 29 to 36 ABY. Most of this period was relatively uneventful, but in 35 ABY, the Galactic Alliance started to be embroiled in a conflict in the unknown regions between the insectoid Killik hives and the Chiss Ascendancy. Savv was unfortunately killed during the conflict, when his speeder was hit by another vehicle being piloted by an insectoid Vrotix. This Vrotix had been drinking black membrosia, essentially a drug being trafficked by the Killik hives to other insects throughout the galaxy, trying to trick them into joining their hives by liking this video and subscribing for more. Upon Savv's death, he was replaced by Grand Admiral Gilad Pellaeon as acting Supreme Commander, since the Empire was now part of the Galactic Alliance as the New Republic's successor state. He had actually retired at the close of the Yuuzhan Vong War, since he was now in his late 80s, but due to the pressing need of the Galactic Alliance for someone of his vast, arguably unparalleled experience at the time, he agreed to at least temporarily take up the post. This also meant that an Imperial once again controlled the largest military force in the galaxy. For the remainder of the Killik War, known as the Dark Nest Crisis, Pellaeon commanded from the Super Star Destroyer Megador, and it seems as if this remained his flagship throughout his tenure, which lasted another 4 years until 40 ABY, and at that point he wasn't even necessarily looking to retire, because as we all know, there is nothing more permanent than temporary. In 40 ABY, a new conflict arose as Corellia began a revolt against the Galactic Alliance, which spread across the galaxy called the Second Galactic Civil War. This war also saw the return of Trace Crefay, who joined the Confederacy along with most Bothans. Pellaeon resigned his position as Supreme Commander when Jacen Solo, the grandson of Darth Vader, who was well on his own way to becoming a Sith Lord, was granted the rank of Colonel by Chief of State Cal Omas, and given control of the Galactic Alliance Guard, essentially the secret police. Pellaeon thought that the power being granted to Solo and the GAG was far too broad, so he returned to the Imperial Remnant, hoping to keep them out of the war and once again becoming the Supreme Commander of the Imperial Remnant's military. Pellaeon was replaced by the second Mon Calamari to hold the post, Cha Niathal. On top of being the same species as Ackbar, she used Ackbar's former flagship Galactic Voyager as her own. Prior to taking the position of Supreme Commander, she had been an advisor to Pellaeon as well, and she harbored political ambitions beyond the military. She joined with Colonel Solo to execute a coup against Chief of State Cal Omas, killing him and establishing themselves as the joint political and military leaders of the Alliance. Although, like many who stayed loyal to the Alliance, she began having misgivings about Solo's intentions and even mental state. Solo petitioned Pellaeon and the Neutral Empire to assist in the recapture of the Fondor shipyards in 41 ABY, promising to cede planets including the shipyard world of Bilbringi to the Empire for their assistance. Pellaeon, pressured by the Moff Council, ultimately agreed, but during the fighting, Niathal, who had already been in contact with Jedi forces opposing Jacen Solo, now known as Darth Kaitis, offered Fondor the chance to surrender, which they accepted. Kaitis ignored the surrender, continuing to assault Fondor as punishment for their rebellion. This would make a great standalone battle breakdown, but I won't go too far into the specifics beyond saying that Niathal and Pellaeon, both ordering their forces to ignore or attack Kaitis respectively, resulting in Pellaeon's assassination by Kaitis' apprentice Tahiri Vela, and Niathal taking away a third of Kaitis' forces, joining with the opposition. With Niathal having turned against the Galactic Alliance, the position of Supreme Commander became effectively filled by a second Bothan, Nek Buatsu, although he didn't officially hold the position of Supreme Commander until after the Second Galactic Civil War ended. We also only have his position confirmed in 43 ABY, but I feel like all the context clues point to him pretty much officially taking over this role at the point that the war ends. People were even trying to offer him the position of Chief of State. He had risen to prominence as the commander most effectively able to beat Grand Admiral Thrawn in simulated exercises, and he'd also played a significant role in the Dark Nest Crisis. During the Second Galactic Civil War, he was responsible for many of the Galactic Alliance's biggest victories, proving himself to be the most capable of Kaitis' admirals and then taking a leading role in Reconstruction. He turned down the role of Chief of State when offered, instead choosing to stay on as Supreme Commander, but he endorsed former Imperial Admiral Natasi Dala for the role, who'd returned from exile at the request of Pellaeon to assist in taking down Darth Kaitis. Throughout his career, he seemed to command a new model of the old Victory-class Star Destroyer called the Admiral Ackbar. It's super weird to me that the ship named after Ackbar was a Victory Star Destroyer, but whatever. He continued to oversee the Galactic Alliance military through the end of the published works in this period, assisting in taking down Abeloth in the Fate of the Jedi series, but from there we need to jump forward nearly a century to the Legacy of the Force series, where we have our final known Supreme Commander, Admiral Gar Stazi. In the war between the Galactic Alliance and Fel Empire from 127 to 130 ABY, called the Sith Imperial War because of the cooperation between the Fel Empire and Darth Krayt Sith, Gar Stazi was the commander of the Galactic Alliance core fleet. But after a desperate attempt to end the war by capturing or killing Emperor Roan Fel at Kamas failed, most of the faltering Galactic Alliance surrendered, leaving Gar Stazi as the de facto supreme commander of the Galactic Alliance in exile. Ultimately, after Krayt overthrew Fel, the Galactic Alliance in exile allied with Roan and Marassia Fel of the Empire in exile, along with the remnants of the Jedi Order, successfully taking down Krayt and recreating a ruling triumvirate of Stasi, Marassia Fel, and Jedi Master Kukruk to lead the reinstated Galactic Alliance. That's going to do it for our look at the New Republic and Galactic Alliance's Supreme Commanders. Let me know which is your favorite or if there's one you'd like to see a standalone dedicated video on. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.